Welcome to New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Berletic. Joining me is Rasheed from Red Pill Diaries. I will put all of his information in the video description below after the live stream is over. Angelo is taking a break. He is my regular co-host. He is taking a break. And so we'll just talk about these issues, Rasheed and myself, and we'll also take questions. If you have a question, just use a capital Q or write question in all caps, and then your question makes it easy for me to see it and star it while we're talking and laying everything out. And then toward the end of the program, we will get to all of the questions. I think I already saw some. Rasheed, how are you doing?
I'm blessed. I'm breathing, so I'm blessed, man. How about yourself?
Yes, likewise. Although it does, this line of work does get exhausting, and I think like people like Angelo and myself, every once in a while, just get overloaded with looking at all of this, trying to explain it to people. I mean, we're lucky we have a really great audience that does get it, but to attempt to convince other people who are flooded and drowning in propaganda, it is exhausting. It is a constant uphill battle. But why don't we start with the first topic? I want to talk about these U.S.-Iran peace talks. The U.S. has absolutely no interest at all in peace. This is all about, as we have pointed out many times, this is laid out in policy papers like the Brookings Institution's 2009, which Pat the Persia report, to create a deal, propose it to Iran, make it look like to the world that the U.S. wants diplomacy and that Iran is the one being unreasonable. They want nuclear weapons, and for all of the wrong reasons. And once the U.S. is able to convince the world of that, then they can justify a war with Iran, either using their Israeli proxies or wading into it themselves directly. That is literally what it says in the Brookings paper from 2009, and that is what they have been trying to implement ever since. And we remember the first Iran nuclear deal. This was actually mentioned in the policy paper. It was proposed during the Obama administration. It was always meant to be sabotaged. The Trump administration was the administration that took that role and ran with it, abandoning it unilaterally, no evidence at all. And now here is President Trump, because he just so happens to be the guy in office. Now he's saying, hey, let's do a deal again with Iran. Makes no sense for Iran to agree to anything with the U.S. as a nation, as with the U.S. government, and also with Trump specifically, because he has a history himself personally. His administrations have walked away from multiple deals and even treaties. Let's take a look at this first article right here. Iran rejects demand from U.S. to rely on imported uranium. The U.S. is also trying to convince Iran to abandon its long-range ballistic missile program. This is a conventional weapons deterrent that they have already used to deter U.S. and Israeli strikes. And I think that it has worked to a certain extent. The U.S. wants to completely disarm Iran to then do exactly what they have done to Iraq and Libya and Syria and every other country that gave up their weapon programs, did what the U.S. wanted for supposed peace, for the U.S. to just turn on them, betray every agreement made, overthrow them, and destroy their country. And so this is what Iran is facing right now. And let's see what else. So I still hear people tell me the U.S. wants President Trump. He's the peace president. He wants peace with Iran. This is a real attempt at peace. President Trump doesn't want war with Iran. He doesn't want it. And he's putting together a team to achieve this. And everyone else is sabotaging him. But President Trump is determined, and he just named Michael Anton to lead technical talks with Iran. The Trump administration is staffing up its team as the president signals his strong desire for a deal. So he has a strong desire for a deal. Let's see who Michael Anton is. Well, he has a U.S. Department of State page, Director of Policy Planning. This was actually, it was the previous Trump administration and also the Bush Jr. administration. We'll find out what he was doing. This is also a recent, no, this is from 2018. Trump's national security spokesman plans to leave White House. So they're talking about Michael Anton, also worked with George W. Bush on his National Security Council, and a former BlackRock managing director. So this is the anti-deep state president fighting this 5D chess game against the deep state. And he's recruiting from George Soros, fund managers, directing managers from BlackRock. I mean, who's buying this? And then I found this document from justice.gov. So that's the official U.S. Justice Department website. And they talk about Michael Anton, and this was back during the Bush Jr. administration. And here he is lying about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He was part of this effort to lie to the American people and the world about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction to justify this otherwise indefensible war of aggression against Iraq. The sanctions preceding the war killed 500,000 children, as we remember Madeleine Albright admitting, and the war and occupation spanning 20 years and continues to this day has killed over 1 million more people, probably many more than that. And it served as a base in the region to create instability everywhere else. We're talking about the lives of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people dead, maimed, otherwise disrupted by the US, its war of aggression, its hegemony over the region. That is who this person, the Trump administration, has named to participate in these talks with Iran. That's what he is guilty of. That is what the blood that is on his hands. Rasheed, what do you make of this? Is this just President Trump slipping up, or is this deliberate? Or they just hope that nobody looks into the background of these people? They just trust that, oh, he's a great guy. He's going to get these talks right on track. Right on track to what?
They don't respect the people. They think that everybody is lazy, and that your memory is short. And sometimes they even put the stuff right in front of the people's face because they don't think that the people have enough desire for the truth to look for it. And when we're talking about Iran, there's something very specific on why they have to go to war with Iran. For any war or possible war for China to be manageable or moderately successful by the United States, Iran has to be taken out. And the reason is, and I'm going to repeat this, and I know ad nauseum, Iran is the underbelly of both Russia and China. And it sits in the center of what the U.S. had been planning for Pipelanistan for the longest. They want to control all of the resources. They want to control the waterways. They want to control the air ways. They want to control the land routes. And this, Iran stands strategically right in the center, because if they can take out Iran, they can then destroy the Belt and Road Initiative, or at least hinder it, which will buy the U.S. dollar another day, which will keep the empire humming along. And all of this stuff about a deal, Trump is trying to get a deal, all of this is a head fake. And what I mean by that is, you notice in the last week or so, 2 weeks, they were dropping little hints in the news that Trump waved off an attack by Israel. Trump did this, and the people bought this. Even a lot of the so-called alternative media bought that. And it wasn't that Trump waved off. If anything, if he may have postponed it because the weapons and everything were not in play. All of the things were not in line. Remember that Israel continues to get large shipments of weapons on a daily basis by the United States. The United States continues to commingle and co-train with the Israeli military, and they've been going over war games to strike Iran. And so when the media and when the pundits say, well, Trump is out for peace, well, why didn't he pull out of the JCPOA? No one can answer that. Well, for a better deal. Well, we have the videos where Kerry and all of the negotiators says there is no better deal. And to pull out of the JCPOA, right, hoping for a better deal is not rational. So the man who pulls out of the JCPOA and then threatens Iran with war if Iran does not capitulate to a new deal, not a negotiation, but a capitulation. It's not gelling together. And Trump, the media, and everyone else thinks that the people are too lazy to put 1 and 1 together to make 2. They believe that the people will put 1 and 1 together and it'll make 7, but it never will. So we're on the verge, we're on the cusp of a war with Iran, regardless of what anyone says, because America has her eyes on China. And just like with Russia, she did not immediately attack Russia. She tried to weaken Russia by taking out some of Russia's allies first: Armenia, Georgia, Ukraine. This is the way that the United States acts. She took out Libya. Remember, Libya was an ally of Russia. All of these nations, Iraq was buying weapons from Russia. All of these nations are strategically sliced off so that they can weaken the power that they're after, and then they can make war on and that's what we're looking at.
Yes, and you're talking about the U.S. claiming to wave off Israel. Again, people need to read the Which Path to Persia policy paper all the way back in 2009. They lay this all out clearly. They are going to use Israel to carry out strikes the U.S. itself can't afford to do themselves. They can't afford it politically or militarily. They don't want to absorb the repercussions of a war of aggression. They want Israel to kick it off for them. And they may possibly want Israel to use nuclear weapons in ways the U.S. would never be able to justify and get away with. And then Israel, having done that, would be a pariah. And the U.S. could say, look, we tried to wave them off, and they just did it on their own. That's in the Brookings paper, using Israel in this way to advance U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. Rasheed, you're talking about the underbelly of Russia and China and ultimately multipolarism. And any nation in the Middle East with an independent foreign policy that does not subordinate itself to the United States and its hegemony is a threat to U.S. hegemony across the entire region and ultimately all around the world. And so this is an imperative for the U.S. It's indefensible, but that is their imperative. They want to take over the Middle East. It is key, just as you say, Rasheed, to control, encircle, contain both Russia and China. Where is China getting a lot of its hydrocarbons from? The Middle East. If you disrupt the Middle East, if you take out Iran, if you are controlling the region, even if you don't control the region, but you manage to turn it upside down in chaos, you now have the ability to put that economic pressure on China. It's all about eliminating peer and near peer competitors. I constantly see people in the comment section and in comments and replies all across all of my social media platforms. This is for Israel. The U.S. is working for Israel. Is it also, the U.S. is doing the exact same thing in Europe. They're also doing the exact same thing in Asia. They have their proxies in both of these regions. Israel is their proxy in that region. People need to wake up to this. The idea that Israel is somehow controlling the U.S. gives the U.S. a free pass for all of these things that it is doing all around the world, not just in the Middle East, but all around the rest of the world. So people need to be a little more, just like you say, Rasheed, Washington and Wall Street ultimately have no respect for people and their ability to reason and use logic. They think they're emotional, easy to manipulate. Do you want to prove them right, or would you like to prove us right? We believe that you can think rationally, use logic, add it up. 1 + 1 = 2, not 7. That's what we hope. You have anything else you want to add to this situation? This is the situation in the Middle East and with Iran and the U.S. currently waging war on Yemen. Is there anything else you want to add to this? I don't think this is something that's going to just pass. It's not going to pass because it's so integral to the U.S. encirclement and containment of both Russia and China. And we'll get to Russia next and what a farce those so-called peace talks are. Do you have anything else you want to add about Iran and the Middle East specifically?
I think the viewers should realize that the United States is trying to blow the region up. If they can't control it, they would rather blow it up because one of their mottos is out of chaos comes order, and they believe that they can fashion something new. It'll give them a little lifeline because people don't understand that the empire is playing against time. That is the main enemy of America, time. she does not have the time to do the things that she wanted to do because of the economic meltdown, the debt crisis, the loss of geopolitical and political capital across the board globally. So the things that she's doing, you'll say, well, my God, there's no rational person would do that. But when you're desperate, you're not rational. Your policies are rational to you, but for the sound, sane person, they become irrational. And what we're watching is a lot of missteps by the United States, and they're throwing any and everything up against the wall to try to prevent China from emerging as a power. And why did I say China and not Iran? Is because they look at Iran as a junior partner to China and the United States, and they want to prevent Iran from cementing itself strategically in the Eastern Bloc. Because if this were to happen, think about this. Iran has the huge oil reserves, huge gas reserves. Look at where it's located at. Look at how it's withstood sanctions for 30, 40 plus years. Look at how it's now a part of the BRICS. Iran is a living, learning lesson for other nations that, hey, if we persevere, if we go through the sanctions, we can come out on this side without capitulating to the United States and with the empire. That's a lesson that they don't want others to pick up on, because you'll have small nations, medium-sized nations, and large nations alike saying, you know what, screw this. If we've got to be sanctioned, then we'll be sanctioned and we'll endure it so that we can then go with China and Russia. Because another thing to look at is if you're in the on the side of China and Russia and America sanctions you, you still get all the goods because you're trading with China, the largest manufacturer in the world. So these nations, they're now starting to think about that. Oh, America sanctions us, we can't use her dollar. Well, let's just use the renminbi, or let's just use virtual currencies, or let's just use this. We don't particularly need the dollar. And I think this is what is causing the United States to eye Iran very strongly, because this America is seeing that with every step we make and every policy initiative that we try to enact to try to bring nations to their heels with the dollar, we're weakening our position, and we're also weakening the dollar. And they're in this catch-22, and they believe that the only thing that can stop the slide is war. And so we're going to have war.
Even if it can't stop it, what war does is stop others from being successful. And while you were talking about the different reasons the U.S. needs to stop Iran in the Middle East, I was just thinking about the population. Iran isn't a small country geographically or in terms of population, and so I was just Wikipedia is hardly a reliable source, but basic statistics it usually does well on, and it's the second largest country by population in the region, 89.3 million people. That is a large population. Only Egypt and I would say Turkey have, Egypt has a larger population. Turkey has a pretty large population. And then the next largest is Iraq with 40 million, Saudi Arabia with 34 million, Yemen with almost 30 million. And we can see all of the effort the U.S. is putting into bombing and subordinating Yemen. And so, large numbers of people in a country like Iran, and were to cement itself in with the East, as you say, Rasheed, that would, if that became irreversible, that would just be another part of this wall that is going up between America, its ambition toward hegemony, and the rest of the world it seeks to victimize. So it's a very good point that you brought up there. Now let's talk about what is going on with the U.S. and Russia and these supposed peace talks. So, whoever's going to Moscow to meet with, I think it's Witkoff, went to Moscow to meet with the Russian government, and they're going to talk about this peace plan and peace proposal that sounds suspiciously a lot like what U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth laid out back in February. I hate to keep going back to that. And as this is going on, as a U.S. representative is being sent to Moscow, a car bomb killed a Russian general in Moscow. And I have talked about this for the last 3 years because even the Western media has admitted this over at least the last 2 years. And this is a New York Times article, The Spy War, how the CIA secretly helped Ukraine fight Putin. And it didn't start in 2022. It says for more than a decade. So we're talking about from 2014 onward. The United States has nurtured a secret intelligence partnership with Ukraine that is now critical for both countries encountering Russia. And basically what this article describes, and we've gone over this many, many times, is how the US didn't just politically capture Ukraine in Kiev, installing a client regime, hand-picked client regime into power, which includes people like Zelensky and his inner circle. They also institutionally captured Ukraine's military and intelligence networks, military and civil, the SBU and military intelligence, all of them. And I think there's another GUR in Ukraine. It's a very similar model to Russia, even though Ukraine pretends they have nothing to do with Russia, but a lot of it mirrors Russia's system. And they admit how the CIA completely reorganized it. They created entire units of intelligence operators, including armed commandos that carried out armed operations in Russian-held territory. We're killing Russians, CIA-trained and backed operators killing Russians in Russian-held territory. And one of their star pupils was, this is a long article. Here he is, Budanov. I think people who are following the conflict are very familiar with Budanov. He is now the head of Ukrainian intelligence. And what has he done? He has bragged about how Ukraine has assassinated journalists, which Newsweek has no problem referring to as propagandists, to justify it, to vilify them and justify killing journalists, simply for reporting at that time things that the Western media is now openly reporting and agreeing with. Not just that, but they also admit the killing of a Russian general shows Ukraine spies remain lethal. So the same bunch of spies are killing Russian generals, other officers in Moscow. This was from 2024. This wasn't this most recent incident. And now this most recent incident, just 2 days ago, via BBC, senior Russian general killed by car bomb at Moscow. He was walking by the car and the explosive was detonated, I think, remotely. That's what they're saying. And so Trump envoy meets Putin hours after Moscow killing of Russian general. And what I'm trying to explain here is the U.S. took over Ukraine, every aspect of Ukraine, politically, in terms of intelligence, militarily. They reshaped these institutions to serve as an extension of American aggression vis-a-vis Russia. This is a U.S. war against Russia, and they are killing Russians simply using Ukrainians as intermediaries. They reshaped Ukraine's intelligence agencies, and they are using them against Russia. It is U.S. trained and backed, CIA trained and backed operators killing Russian generals in Moscow right now, as the U.S. poses as some sort of mediator between Russia and Ukraine. It is obscene. It is, again, Rasheed, as you say, it's insulting to the intelligence of the general public. And this is what's going on as the U.S. pretends it wants peace. Now, you don't do things like this if you want peace. At any time, the first 24 hours President Trump was in office, he could have pulled the plug on all U.S. Funding, arms, and support for Ukraine. He could have told the CIA, "You're out of Ukraine. Pack your bags. You're gone. You're out. I'm the commander in chief, and I'm saying you're leaving Ukraine." And then now you've washed your hands of Ukraine. And if we're going to pretend that Europe is on their own program and they want to keep pushing, then so be it. But they didn't do that. And why did they not do that? Because they don't want peace. They want to freeze this war so they can fight it and win it another day, just like they did with Syria, just like Trump did himself when he came into office, the first term in office. He said, "Oh, I'm going to end all these programs backing the rebels in Syria." Obviously, all those programs continued because those exact same rebels actually eventually overthrew the Syrian government right at the end of Biden's administration. Rasheed, before my head explodes, before a vein pops in my head, could you please share your thoughts on this?
Well, it's all political theater. I've been saying this and saying this ad nauseum. There is no way that the United States funds a nation, pays the pensions of soldiers and the civil servants, has infiltrated the intelligence service, has their special forces and British special forces guarding the so-called president and higher up administration officials, and then Zelensky has a free hand to disobey the United States. And I ask everyone, show me where in the history of empire was that ever allowed. No one can point to any time in American empire where they paid for everything, trained, supplied all the weapons, the intelligence and everything, and then allowed for their puppet in power to disobey them, to buck up against them, and to do what Zelensky did with this political kabuki theater in Washington, D.C. against Vance and Trump. And then all of this is theater. It's a head fake, according to the definition of head fake. According to Google, it says head fake is a noun. It is an act of moving the head in such a way as to deceive an opponent as to one's intended direction or move. That's what we're watching. All of this is political theater. When you hear people say, well, Zelensky is such and such, and he's stubborn and he won't obey. And then I throw back at them and I'll say, well, all America has to do is cut the funding, cut the weapons, or just go in there like they did other leaders that they were tired of and just depose them. If they were so outraged with this, why aren't they deposing him like they did other leaders? They went into Venezuela and deposed Hugo Chavez, and he was the elected official. He wasn't a puppet. They went into Haiti and removed Aristide from power. They went into Iraq. They went into Libya. And you're telling me a leader that is surrounded by British and U.S. special forces that gets real live intel can disobey the empire and just ignore them? All of this is theater because, first of all, Zelensky needs that kind of backing at home to say, well, I stood up to America. And that way that keeps his legitimacy. And at the same time, it gives America plausible deniability to say, hey, we did everything. If things don't work out, we did everything we can. We're done with. The empire is positioning itself that if things go south, further south, then they can wash their hands and say, well, we have no egg on our face. We tried to sue for peace, but no one asked, well, how did the war come about? And how is the war being maintained? If you tried to sue for peace, then why are you transferring weapons, intelligence, and money, and still training and backing the belligerent party in the discussion? Why isn't anyone saying that?
Exactly. It is literally the U.S. waging war on Russia. There's another New York Times article, a more recent one, that admitted that there are U.S. generals at the top of Ukraine's chain of command deciding absolutely everything that is taking place inside Ukraine on the battlefield, and also in regards to targets inside Russia that, Ukraine, the U.S. is picking out and giving Ukraine the capabilities to go strike. And so suddenly we're supposed to believe that now President Trump wants out, but he can't. It's impossible for him to get out when every single aspect of this war has been enabled and pushed forward by the United States. And people are, and just like you say, it is a head fake because it's supposed to be just like they're doing with Iran. They want to appear that they are the ones pursuing diplomacy. And we just heard it. President Trump was just, I don't know if people were following this. Trump threatens Putin with sanctions after one-on-one Vatican chat with Zelensky. And he was talking about, maybe President Putin just doesn't want peace. Maybe he's just a bloodthirsty warmonger. This is the exact plan that the U.S. has set out for years and years to try to corner Iran, portray Iran as the aggressor, and justify maximum pressure against Iran. Now they're doing the exact same thing for Russia. I tried. I wanted peace with Russia, and they were just being impossible. They wouldn't agree to anything. They won't agree to simply disarm themselves, pack up, go home, and let us send European troops into Ukraine and freeze the conflict, exactly like what we did in Syria before we eventually not just overthrew Syria, but further isolated Iran, and now we're on the verge of going to war with Iran itself. Russia is not stupid. They can see what the U.S. is doing. They're seeing that the U.S. is doing the exact same thing to them. And so, of course, they're not going to agree to any of this. How many times has the U.S. and its proxies, including Europe is politically captured by the U.S. How many times? Minsk 1, Minsk 2, the agreement in Istanbul, and even the ceasefires that the U.S. set up with the Russians. And then Ukraine is carrying out strikes on energy infrastructure inside Russia. Who's giving them the intelligence and the capability to do that? The CIA and these U.S. generals who are still at the top of the chain of command of the Ukrainian military. So it is a complete joke. And anyone who is informed can see straight through it. Unfortunately, far too many people, even people who are informed, their emotions are taking hold of them and is blinding to them. They want peace between the U.S. and Russia so badly, they're willing to ignore the reality that this is a U.S. war on Russia. And if they wanted to end it, they could, just like Trump said he would, he could have done it on the first day. Same goes for Israel. If the U.S. wants Israel to stop wiping out the Palestinians, carrying out genocide, provoking war with all of its neighbors, just like you say, Rasheed, just pull the weapons. It is physically impossible for them to carry out these military operations without a constant flow of weapons, money, political, military support from the United States. And so when this is not happening, it's because Washington doesn't want it to happen. Like you say, they overthrew the government in Syria, even with Russia and Iran defending the government in Damascus, but they can't overthrow Zelensky, who's, like you said, surrounded by U.S. and British and European generals and intelligence officers. Get real. It's just hard to believe. Since we're talking about Russia, I thought this was odd. This is TASS. This is Russian news agency, and I only cite Russian state media. A lot of people accuse me of being a Russian or Chinese propagandist. I never cite Russian or Chinese media ever, unless it's an official statement coming from them. And in this case, that's why I'm citing it. North Korean fighters helped in Kursk region because of partnership treaty diplomats. So this is Russia admitting that, yes, actually, there were North Korean troops fighting in Kursk against the Ukrainian invasion. So Ukrainian troops moved into Russian territory, internationally recognized Russian territory, Kursk, across the border from Sumy in Ukraine, and Russian and North Korean forces fought back against them. They don't really get into too many details as to how many troops were involved and in what capacity, but they admit that they were there and that they were involved. And just from my own perspective as a kind of a military analyst, I would say I don't think that they would have been able to do that much, because it takes time. It could take years or more to carry out joint training between Russian and North Korean troops to integrate them into any sort of military operation. So to what degree were they helping out? I don't know. We'll just have to keep an eye out and see what details emerge after this admission, because we remember Russia wouldn't say no. They didn't say yes, but they didn't say no. Usually when they're doing that, they very rarely outright lie, but when they don't want to admit something that has happened, usually they just stay quiet about it. So a lot of people, I think I remember Alexander Makuris of the Duran, he was also kind of noticing how they weren't saying no. So there's a possibility that there might be some North Koreans involved in some capacity or another. So lesson learned for analysts who, I really didn't think there were North Koreans involved, at least not in any significant way. But lesson learned. Rasheed, you have anything you want to say about that?
Also, this could also be publicity. Russia could be announcing this as to convey to the West that we are now in a strategic alliance with North Korea militarily. And this could be a way to drop that bomb on the people that are watching it, because a lot of people they've questioned how strong was that agreement between Russia and North Korea. And by opening up this can, right here, it conveys to the West that we have a deeper, stronger military and strategic partnership than we let on to. So I believe this may be a shot across the bow to America and the West to let them know that you're not the only only team on the playing field. There are other teams that want to play with us now. Yeah.
That's a good point. I was kind of thinking the same thing. It's a message to the collective West. We're not by ourselves. We have this treaty with North Korea, and we're exercising it. And it's a treaty that goes both ways. So if you create a problem with North Korea, exactly. and they're setting a precedent, maybe a treaty like this is possible between Russia and Iran, or between Russia and China. Although both China and Iran, they're very hesitant to get in any sort of an alliance like that. But with what the U.S. is doing and the danger it poses to the existence of these three countries and their periphery, all the nations along the periphery, it might be something that they eventually have to move towards. And this is the first step in that direction. So I thought that was interesting. Another point I would like to make is that we were talking about Iran previously. Look at North Korea. North Korea developed nuclear weapons and the ability to deliver them. They have never used a nuclear weapon against anybody else. They don't even really threaten to do so unless they're attacked first. And it serves as a deterrent. And that was the whole point. And look at the United States. They wanted so badly to overthrow the government in North Korea and then exercise control over the entire peninsula, and then use that to even further encircle and contain China. And they failed because North Korea obtained nuclear weapons. And Iran is looking at that. And the US is looking at Iran looking at that. And they're saying, this isn't about Iran getting nuclear weapons and then threatening peace and security across the region or around the world. It's about Iran getting nuclear weapons and stopping us from threatening peace, security, and stability in the region and around the world. So it's very important for people to understand that. And if you think I'm just guessing that that's what the West is thinking, again, in the policy papers, they admit Iran is never going to get nuclear weapons and then just randomly use them. They're not insane. They're not irrational. They will get them. They will use them as a deterrent. They really don't. They admit in the policy papers, they don't even want nuclear weapons. They just need them because of the threat the U.S. poses to them. And this is in policy papers, drawing up plans to lie to the world, to create a pretext to threaten and overthrow the Iranian government. So it's very important to understand how all of that's connected. Yes, Rasheed.
I saw, as you were talking, I was skimming over the article about the North Koreans in Russia. And I want to read something to you, if it's okay, Brian, because it lends more credence to our perspective on what we just said. It says, Russia is looking forward to further strengthening its ties with Pyongyang. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has said. It says North Korea has shown a high level of solidarity with Russia by developing its forces to help, deploying its forces to help repel the Ukrainian incursion in Russia's Kursk region. The long-rumored presence of North Korean forces in the area was officially confirmed earlier in the day during a televised meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the country's chief of the general staff, Valery Gerasimov. Here it comes right here. North Korean forces were deployed into the area under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement between Moscow and Pyongyang, which came in force last December. Among other things, the treaty envisions mutual military assistance by all means available in the event of an attack. That's exactly what you and I were just commenting on.
Yes, and imagine if Russia developed a treaty like that with China, and China said, you need 5 million rounds a year? What about 5 million rounds a month? We can do that for you. And then just start sending it and bury the US and their proxies in steel. I mean, this is something that the West is looking at, and this is something that the West has feared for decades now. The possibility, I'm not really sure if they understand that they're not inherently superior. I think somewhere in the back of their mind, they understand, no, the collective West is not inherently superior. Once these other nations get their hands on technology, they're equally capable of using it and also advancing it independently of us. And there's many, many more people on Earth outside the collective West. The US is 4% of the global population. So if all other things are equal, all that matters is your human resources, that the quantity and quality. And China has an advantage in both. So we are going to lose if we don't tip the game board upside down right now, void everything, and come out on top on the other side. We are going to lose. And they, like, what's the worst that can happen? You lose, and now you have a proportional, constructive but proportional role on the global stage. You're prosperous, everyone else is prosperous. What is wrong with that? But in their minds, for them, that's the end of the world.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
Unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Yeah. See, when I look at this and I'm envisioning the leadership, I'm thinking from the lunatic perspective that they have of manifest destiny. When you have ruled or you've dominated in so many areas for so long, it's hard for you to accept that you're no longer the cream of the crop. You can see that in sports, any sports branch. Someone who was the best boxer or the best MMA fighter or the best football player, and they overstay their time and start tarnishing their own legacy. We see that right now. America, she still believes that if I can just do this, I know this guy over here is quicker than me, but if I can just move here and get a lucky punch, I can do this. Not realizing that time is against, when time moves against you, I don't care what you do, you cannot beat time. Everybody falls victim to time. And this is something that America does not accept. They believe the propaganda that they are the indispensable nation and that they are the exception to the rules. That's why they say there's rules for thee and not for me. You do this, we'll do this. How dare you get a nuclear weapon while having a stockpile of 5,000 nuclear weapons? How dare you occupy a little land while allowing Israel to occupy land, and you are in multiple countries occupying that land? In their mind, because it's a bizarro mind, well, up is down and down is up, in is out and out is in. It's okay for us to rob, pillage, rape, and bomb because we're doing it for benevolent reasons in our mind. That is to keep the empire the empire. Because if we're not controlling the world, then it's chaos. But in the mind of the people who are looking from the other end, they're saying, these people are crazy as hell. They're killing everybody. They want to run everything. They want to bomb everything. They want to dictate everything. And so that manifest destiny and that exceptionalism is what is stopping America from realizing the inherent problems of her reign. You know, they are inebriated on what they used to be, the power that they used to have, the wealth that they used to possess, and the influence that they used to have. You know, and they are not willing to accept an equal or near equal power. That's why Vladimir Putin says that America doesn't accept equals or friends. You have to be a junior partner or a minion or a lackey or something. This is absolutely the case.
Yes, absolutely. And I think individual people we know in our personal lives who are a little bit sociopathic or selfish or self-centered and arrogant, and they believe that they're maybe narcissistic. They believe that they're superior to everyone around them. They're the best. And you see how they handle situations that expose the fact that they really aren't, and how they deal with people that they feel threatened by, who in actual reality are no threat to them at all. And it's all inside their mind. It's kind of scary. I mean, people like that in our personal lives are scary enough. But then imagining a whole group of people like this with control over the media, money, weapons, nuclear weapons, that gets very, very scary. And people often ask, how come, Russia and China and Iran, they're not more aggressive? They don't react to this or that or the other thing, because I think they understand how unstable the United States is from a mentality point of view. That people in Washington and on Wall Street are megalomaniacs, and you have to, as big and strong as they imagine they are, mentally they're very fragile. You have to handle them with very gentle hands, or things will break down and get out of control. People, even in your individual life, you have to walk on eggshells when you talk to them, not to harm their fragile ego. So yes, these are all things we got to keep in mind. There's a couple. Let's see, where are we at on time? Well, it's just a couple more news items. I just want to go show them very quickly, and then we could talk about them all together. India opposition slams Trump F-35 offer. Russia makes its own pitch. As you can see in the picture, India flies mostly Russian-made weapons. They have a very close relationship with Russia. A lot of their military equipment comes from Russia. And also, Russia is happy to make deals with India where Russian technology is manufactured in India. There are technology transfers. China is very big on technology transfers as well. The high-speed rail line here in Thailand is a result of China coming in, transferring the technology to Thai companies, overseeing it, helping where necessary, but Thai companies ultimately having the ability to make the construction material, but also then run it once it's complete. And so there's that. Yes, people are saying in the comment section, the F-35 is junk. It's overpriced, is overpriced, and it underperforms like so many other Western weapons. And we can see this playing out in Ukraine right now. And then there were, I have a person who sends me from Myanmar, who sends me information regarding that conflict there. The U.S. is waging a proxy war against the central governments in Myanmar. They use all of these ethnic groups that used to be part of the British colonial army when the British controlled Myanmar as a colony called Burma. And you'll still hear many people in the West refer to Myanmar as Burma, and they do that on purpose. There have been agreements between the Chinese government is working with the central government in Myanmar and working with these militant groups and telling them to get out of this territory that they've taken over. Who's giving them weapons and ammunition? These people live in huts in the middle of the jungle. Where are they getting all of this? And they got drones now, weapons, ammunition. Where is it coming from? It's coming from the United States through covert channels. It always has, and it is. And so China is intervening because they understand, look at what's going on. And they're not intervening militarily, but diplomatically. They understand that if Myanmar collapses, that is right on China's border. It's also part of the Belt and Road Initiative. This is why the U.S. is destabilizing Myanmar in the first place. They've tried to take the chaos in Myanmar and transplant it here in Thailand, because Thailand is Myanmar's neighbor to the east, and across the rest of Southeast Asia as well. So it's important to keep a close eye on this. So yes, the military in Myanmar is returning to these areas that these U.S.-backed militants took over. And just to give you an idea, these militants are as bad as ISIS. I also get videos, and I don't share this stuff because it's horrific, but there are videos of these militants killing people, killing Myanmar soldiers, but also killing young people that mistakenly join their ranks, and then they're like, I didn't sign up for this, I want to go home. And they kill them in ways very consistent with what we see ISIS doing in the Middle East. And so it's no surprise, they're all US proxies, and they all play from the same playbook. And this was one that you told me about, Rasheed, right before we went live. China seizes control of disputed reef and plants national flag near Philippine military base. So China is pushing back against this U.S. backed push to first take the Philippines, turn it into the Ukraine of Southeast Asia, and then create conflict in the South China Sea. The U.S. swears that they're in the South China Sea to protect the freedom of navigation and maritime trade. But as I've always pointed out, this is CSIS. This is funded by the U.S. government and the arms industry. Global trade through the South China Sea. See that gigantic dot? That is the biggest dot in the whole world. That is the biggest dot. The vast majority of goods being sent through the South China Sea are coming from China, going to its trade partners. And all of these smaller but still significant dots in this region are all sending it mostly back to China. And I have a couple of maps here. Danny Haifeng, I was on his show for a live stream, and he showed this map, very interesting. Back in 2000, the U.S. was the largest trade partner for all of these countries in blue. By 2024, everything in red. These nations count China as their largest trade partner. And look inside this circle here. I don't know if people can see it. And right inside there, that is the South China Sea. And so all of this trade that the U.S. swears they're there to protect, this is all China's trade. It's going to and from China. The U.S. is not in the South China Sea. They're not there in the Philippines, backing the Philippines to protect anything. They are there to disrupt it, to interrupt it, to blockade it, if the possibility presents itself, and to feed the Philippines into a proxy war with China, just like they've done to Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia. So that is that. Rasheed, you have anything you want to say about any of these stories, especially the last one, since you were the one that told me about that?
Before that, I want to go. Luwak Paul says India is trying to play everyone, not good. Absolutely. That's a point that I've been making for the longest. India continues to straddle the fence with being a part of the global South, cemented there, or accepting the bribes and the all of the accolades and the promises that the United States and the West continues to try to put on India. They want India to be a counterweight to China. And India, and this is what blows my mind here. Brian, I'm sorry, but I got to say this for a minute. This is what blows my mind about India, which shows me that they're still trapped in that colonial mind. You have one dust up with China militarily in 62, and it's of your own doing now. And so the Chinese put you on your backside, and they could have gone further, but they decided to come back within China just to show you that we could do this to you. Now, you have been holding a grudge against China for that dust up, yet you have no problems working with the United States. You have no problems working with Britain, who stole trillions of your dollars and enslaved your entire subcontinent. And you can still see past that, but you are always viewing China with suspicion. This shows me the Stockholm syndrome that still is pervasive in the leadership of India. They too want to be the leaders want to be accepted too badly by the West as a legitimate government, or they want to be accepted as a power by the West. And I think this is the undoing of a lot of nations. China got that out of their mind, because at one time the Chinese wanted that, and then the Chinese realized that this was not beneficial and this was not compatible with their plans to grow their economy, get their people out of poverty, and help other nations. So they rejected the colonialistic mind. And look at them right now. They went from the poorest nation on the planet 50 years ago to the richest nation on the planet. And it seems like somewhere in between that, India has lost itself because it sees China as an adversary, though China is its largest trading partner. China is its largest investor. India makes a huge amount of money in its economy from selling drugs, some pharmaceuticals, but the ingredients come from China. And it is crazy, the dynamics of this, and how colonialism is still real, and how it traps the minds of people and governments alike, how they will overlook things that are beneficial to their nation and into their neighborhood for the sake of a promise by people who always break promises. I'm sorry I had to go on a tangent on that, Brian, but it's just, it blows my mind to the level of how colonialism has dug into the minds of even these so-called independent leaders of these independent nations. Do you have something to say on that, Brian?
Yes, I go on a rant about this almost every single time I'm behind a microphone, because this is what I always warn people about. People say, well, the U.S. and their tariffs, nobody's going to go along with this. And I say, that's not true, because I would have thought before 2014, Europe would never have gone along with this proxy war with Russia and Ukraine. But they did. Why is that? Because they've been politically captured. Political capture today is the equivalent of being colonized centuries ago and 4 centuries. And so what happens is you get these people who are put in place who have this very specific mindset, just as you described it. It's a subservient mindset. It's this hungry ego that's always starving because these individuals themselves don't have the ability to do anything worthwhile to gain legitimate credit for themselves. And so they subordinate themselves to someone. They attach their ego to the United States, to the UK, to the collective West. And this is how they get through life. And when you have people like that in power in Europe or in India or in countries here in Southeast Asia, they're going to do that. They're going to put the interests of their own country, which they might not even be aware of, second to whatever the West tells them, because whatever the West tells them and their obedience to being told to do that, that is their pathway upward in their minds. That's how they see it. And a lot of these people couldn't care less if their whole country goes over the cliff, because they always know it's just a passport and a plane ride away. The West is always a plane ride away, and they could just leave everything that they've let crumble into dust behind. And how many times have we seen these opposition groups completely destroy a country, and then the opposition leaders disappear? And even if they stay, they're kings of the ashes, right? And so they're already small people to begin with, and so that makes them happy. And so it's a very dangerous and I think underestimated aspect of American hegemony, their ability to politically capture individual people, governments, even populations, because the propaganda does that to the population, just as you're describing these leaders. U.S. propaganda does that to an entire population. There's a huge threat to the emergence of multipolarism. I think multipolarism, we already see defense initiatives in the traditional sense, military hardware, interoperability between militaries. What about defending information, political, and education space? I think that is equally important. It's something that I think is still neglected and allows the U.S. to continue threatening multipolarism, where if you did plug these national security holes, the U.S. would be otherwise powerless. So it's a very good point, Rasheed. It's something that I think we should bring up every single time we talk about geopolitics. That said, and since we're almost on 1 hour, I have 15 questions. If you didn't ask your question yet, try again next time. We'll go through some of these questions. I'm going to read some of them before, just to make sure it's not something we went over already. Well, maybe. Do you think war with Iran will happen under Trump 2.0, or will it be handed to the next admin, just like Ukraine, which would in the future further push U.S. society into the far right extreme ideology? It's hard to say. As Rasheed always says, the U.S. is out of time. And so they're speeding through things that doesn't even make sense for Trump to have rejected the Iran nuclear deal and then proposed an Iran nuclear deal. Why is he doing that? Because they're out of time. They can't wait for the next 4 years to do this with Iran with some Democrat president. They have to break through the illusion and have Trump do it, even though it makes no sense at all for him to do it. There's no credibility to these peace talks, but they have him doing it anyway. Is a war possible? It's hard to tell. This cannot be predicted, because even if the U.S. plans to go to war with Iran, there are things Iran, China, and Russia can do to change the dynamics that make going to war impossible for the U.S. So we just have to keep a very close eye on it. Do not underestimate the danger of this. Rasheed, anything you want to jump in and say, feel free.
Yeah, I talked with Larry Johnson. I talked with Larry Johnson, and I asked him about that very question there. This was about 2 weeks ago, and he said that if things continue to go as they're going, and it seems like they're continuing to go as they go, he sees war between the U.S. and Iran coming in months, in a few months. So we're not the only ones seeing this. Other people are watching the irrational behavior of the political elite. Everyone is watching the economic situation globally, because all of this goes back to economics also, because with the meltdown of the financial system that was put into place by the Western world, they become more desperate. And in America's mind is to, if I cannot rule, I'm burning everything to the ground. And maybe from the ashes we'll start something new. And maybe I'll put myself in a position where that I can pierce through the ashes, and maybe I'll be the first one up to propose a system. But this is no good, because you'll have the same people from the old ruling the new. And so the new will not be new. It'll just be a rehashment of the old. Brian, I want to say something to this guy in this chat here, if you would allow me. Krishna Patel. He says, I guess because I was talking about colonialism. And he says, coming from a Muslim telling us where it's trapped it to come out colonial mind. I don't understand some of that, but I can make out what he's saying. First of all, you just assume yes, I am Muslim, but you assume that. But my father was Christian. So I'm very learned in that. So before you make judgments about me, ask me. You understand? I'm not telling you anything that is not written down. When I'm telling you about the colonial mind, all one has to do is go look it up in Indian writings. Look at it in British papers, because the British Crown still say that they hold a section of the leadership of India. They still hold a section of the leadership of Pakistan. This is why these people always put in policies that are a detriment to their own sovereignty and to the will of the people. I'm not making this stuff up. If you have a problem with that, then you should have a problem with your own government's writings, or the British writings, or the United States writings. And I'll leave it there on that.
Yeah, sure. Anytime someone says something in the comment section, you're more than, especially if it's addressed to you. I can't find the comment and see what they actually wrote. But anyway, yes, it doesn't matter, because we're all talking about facts. This doesn't matter what we are, what our background is. What we're talking about are things that are factual, that are indisputable, no matter who's saying it. It doesn't matter. I often have people accuse me of being like a Russian or Chinese propagandist, but it's like, what are they paying me to do? I'm showing you U.S. policy papers. I'm repeatedly going back to Secretary Hegseth and what he laid out in February from the Department of Defense website. I'm not citing RT or CGTN. So these are people who don't have arguments, and they just have to cling to something to excuse themselves from having to accept the truth that is being discussed. Let's see here. This is a question. There was a big explosion at an Iranian port this week. Was it a signal from the U.S.? Was that firework explosion a couple of years in Beirut ago just fireworks? Well, I think in both cases it was fertilizer. And was it some sort of black op from the U.S. or one of their proxies? I don't know. It creates huge amounts of damage, death, and destruction. It obviously damages the economy of both countries. To what degree, I don't know. I'm not sure about what the numbers are there. It creates damage to infrastructure. So it is a blow. But accidents do happen. There are huge industrial explosions in every country throughout the history of industrialization. So was it an accident? Was it an operation? I don't know. We have to wait and see. Sometimes it is just an accident. So we have to just keep an open mind for both possibilities, not try to, and I'm not saying that anyone is doing this, but don't try to take everything and shoehorn it into a theory. If you don't know, you just admit you don't know. Let's see what else. Sure.
Brian, I hate this, but I have to respond to this. He's back in here again, and first he tells me to shut up. He tells me to shut up. He tells me that I don't know what I'm talking about, even though I'm referring him to the various sources where he can go pick this stuff up. And then he tells me this. This coming from a black man. Shut up. This is what he says. So let me put something on your mind before we go further. And
what is their name?
Krishna Bhagnak Patel or something like that, and he has the Star David up in red. Okay, and so his at 8:55 he says, "This coming from a black man. Shut up." Okay, this is the racism that comes out of India. But let me tell you something. I'm going to lay something on your mind, and this should kill all of this from a black man, okay? To India, okay? Do you understand what the word India means? It means land of the black man. Do you understand that? Do you know that India was once part of the Ethiopian Empire? Do you know that? And Mr. Patel, let me put something else on your mind. Here's another fact that you should understand. Your Ganges River in India was named after an Ethiopian king that ruled India, King Ganges. So before you start downing black people or having negative response, go do a little history research, okay? Shut your pie hole and let's move on.
And also, he's gone. I don't give trolls breathing room. If I saw it, I would have gotten rid of them post haste. I'm not a free speech absolutist. I believe in civilized discourse, and if people are incapable of doing that, they can go. There's plenty of other places on the internet for them to flourish with their ignorance and their hatred. And I feel bad for India. There's so many smart, good people there who are hostages, held hostage by this colonial mentality. And the worst thing is, because I get this when I argue with U.S.-backed opposition supporters here in Thailand, have no clue that their movement is funded by the U.S. When you show them the NED website, naming the names of the groups that they all follow on X, they still will not accept it. So these are people you cannot reason with. They're brainwashed. I would say that they're victims, as toxic as they are, and as obnoxious and sometimes as violent as they are. They themselves are victims. They've been recruited into burning their own country to the ground and everything around them, and destroying themselves in the process. Think about all of these people who joined the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine or in Syria, the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who have just died horrible deaths signing up for U.S. proxy war, completely brainwashed, so thoroughly convinced that they were doing the right thing. So I don't know. I don't know what the best way is to deal with people like this. I do my best to try to put the facts out there. A lot of these are young people, at least here in Thailand. They're very young people. They don't know anything about anything. When I was young, I didn't know anything about anything. That's not me dunking on young people. I used to be young at one time, and I didn't know anything. And I was ignorant, and I had to grow up. And so I just hope you put enough facts out there, plant the seed, and hopefully someday it'll grow. Let's continue. Let's not let these people derail us. Is Turkey waiting to make a move after an Iran-Israel conflict on either the Iranian Turkish regions or Jerusalem, basically on whatever side becomes the weakest? It's hard to tell. Turkey is part of NATO. It is still, I would say, subordinated to the collective West. Does a lot of things that maybe the collective West doesn't want it to do, but they get away with it because in other areas they're so obedient. The proxy war on Syria Turkey was instrumental in implementing that. So they get some leeway from the US. The US, people don't understand. They're always talking about the greater Israel. Israel's captured the US. The US is their puppets. The US has promised Israel a greater Israel. They have promised Turkey a neo-Ottoman empire. They have promised the Saudis a great Arabian empire. And if you look at the maps of all of these fictional empires that they all want to create, they all overlap. So they would be murdering each other. And that's exactly what empire always does. That's how they use, abuse, divide, and mix up their proxies. They get them at each other's throats so that they're all weak. None of them will ever be strong. None of them will ever have an empire. And the US will always get the final say in everything that they do. Just keep all that in mind with Turkey. And of course, they will try to take advantage of whatever happens, no matter what. It's a good question, something to keep a close eye on. Let's see here. Yes, Rasheed is something. What's going on?
Jamie Dodger. I was looking at a comment they made in the chat. Can Ethiopia please take India back?
I mean, if winning over some of these people takes colonization, that's the biggest favor anyone could do. But I know, like, I just hope that give India time and space, and that's why China isn't going to go to war with India. They'll do almost anything to avoid it, because they know ultimately, in time, this will get out of there. So there are countries that have successfully overcome that colonial mindset. I think Singapore to a good degree, Malaysia is struggling, but I would say getting kind of close. I don't know. It's hard to tell. There's a lot of countries that are working on it. I think India could do it. The problem is they're still way too entwined with the collective West. There's still too many people too deeply invested to really. But just imagine if India was working with China and they're like what they're trying to reinvent the wheel and develop their own high-speed rail. Why? China has it right there. They will give it to you. They will transfer it to you. Just ask them, but they won't, because just like you say, Rasheed, they've got this thing in their mind against China. But if the U.S. or the British had high-speed rail, which they don't, but if they did, they would gladly take it and bring it in and use it. So it really is a problem. It's a prison in their own mind. I think it's
speaking on that, the Chinese prior to Vance going to India, the Chinese wanted an alliance with India to take on America's with Vance, and they as soon as they met with Vance, they hit in China with anti-dumping sanctions and stuff. And I'm like, why would you? The moves didn't make sense to me. It has to be a part of that psychosis of colonialism. When a nation is saying, "Hey, listen, stand with me. I'm going to transfer this to you. I'm going to invest in your economy. No strings attached. Boom, boom, boom. I'm not a colonial power. Maybe the more we integrate economically, and it becomes more beneficial, the less we have to worry about a war between us, and we can get to the negotiating table and settle these out, these issues on our border." But instead, India brings Vance over, and then they agree to certain things, and then instead of aiding your BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization partner, you go and you put anti-dumping sanctions on China, and then you greet America and say, "Hey, maybe we want your weapons," even as you see the weapons in Ukraine breaking down and not being effective or efficient. It is the insanity to this. Sometimes, Brian, I'm like you. Sometimes I have to sit back and when I see this stuff, I'm just amazed, and I have to just get off the internet sometimes, because it's unbelievable the moves that some of these leaders make.
Absolutely. Here in Thailand was never colonized, but that doesn't mean that people, even in present day, their minds aren't being actively colonized by the West. And it works. A lot of these people that work their way into the government on either side of the political divide, there's a US-backed political faction. There's also a Thai political faction that reflects more genuinely Thailand's best interests. There are people on both sides who went over to the West and they studied, and they came back at least partially colonized. And it's scary. It's scary because it really does warp their perception of reality, and it causes them to make horrible, horrible decisions that are definitely not in the best interests of even themselves in the long term. They don't see it that way because, again, brainwashing is real. It really happens. Your perception of reality can be completely different, and then you don't even understand how other people are looking at the world because you are in a bubble, an impenetrable bubble. So it is a real problem, and I think that's why you see China and Russia, they invest so much in their own media, information, space, security, keeping out Western propaganda, also creating full pipelines for their media. Their media don't go over to the US and study and then come back and then run the newsroom for the national news media. But that's what happens here in Thailand. It's scary enough. And they also have Western professors come into Thai universities, and they're just brainwashing one class after the next, and it adds up. And in China, they don't really do that. In Russia, they don't really do. They understand how important it is to have a pipeline from a young person that wants to be in the media, a business owner, in the government, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We need a pipeline where we teach them our values, our interests, and how to serve them, not send them overseas so that they become a ticking time bomb when they come back. It's just reality. And the U.S. would never do that. You will never see a Secretary of State who got a degree in Beijing University or Moscow University. It would never happen. But it always happens the other way around. It's funny how acceptable it seems to so many people. Are world governments really going to sit back and let Israel starve the Palestinians to death? Well, the question is, what can all of these countries do? This is the problem. It's not Israel doing it. It's the U.S. ultimately behind them. And the U.S. still has tremendous control over not just Israel and this whole Palestinian situation, but all the countries that are involved, with the exception of, say, Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon. But there are factions in Lebanon the U.S. does have influence over. And all the Persian Gulf states that are actually funding the vast majority of Hamas and its money are under U.S. control. So think about all of that. And what we're looking at is a strategy of tension. It's made to be deliberately provocative, to get your emotions to override your ability to do logic, reason, research, see through, follow the money, see what is actually going on. They want you to see Israel either, oh, it's this poor innocent country and all the Arabs are beating up on them, or they want you to see Israel's this horrible nation brutalizing all of the Arabs, and they want you to make an emotional decision to pick one side or the other, Hamas or Israel, when in reality, the U.S. is exercising influence over both sides. And if you get sucked into the strategy of tension, which is what it is called, it's called the strategy of tension, where the U.S. or any empire controls both sides or has tremendous influence over both sides of a conflict, it goes on forever because they want it to. They don't want it ever to end because it sucks people in and they're not thinking straight, and they will never get together and say, let's get to the root of what is actually happening. Let's get the U.S. out of the region, get them out of the region, and then they cannot back Israel anymore, and then Israel has to act like a normal nation or suffer the consequences. So this is the problem. This is why it won't get solved, because so many people passionately, and I'm not questioning their passion, they're passionately involved in it, but they are passionately involved in it emotionally, and they have not looked at it rationally or strategically. And so that it is a strategy of tension, and it will never end until people see through it, unfortunately. What could Russia or China do to stop it? Let's just ask that question. Iran, who is obviously invested in the cause of the Palestinians, they have desperately tried to exercise influence over Hamas, and they have overall they have failed. So what could they do? I don't know. It's a hard question to answer.
But when it comes to things like that, America never likes to go to the root cause. That's what's keeping the fire going with Ukraine. Russia continues to say, let's address the causes of what got us here. And America keeps beating around the bush and never addressing the causes.
Exactly. And what is the root cause of this conflict between Israel and Palestine? First of all, the U.S. is backing the worst actors on both sides, but also it's because Israel's illegally occupying territory that doesn't belong to them. According to the UN, it's not the Palestinians or the Iranians saying this. It's international law that says they are in violation and they are occupying other people's territory. So if you start with that right there, that is the root cause. The U.S. involvement in the region, its use of Israel as a proxy, that is the root cause, and everything stems from that, including Israel's illegal occupation of all of this territory, not just Palestinian territory, but now Syrian territory, Lebanese territory. They're working their way into everything. Do you guys think Trump is just another example of what Noam Chomsky describes as the manufacturer of consent? Yes, of course. It's the WWE, but for geopolitics. So no cage matches, but plenty of drama, like you would see in the ring, before the fighting gets started. We've actually used that as an analogy many times on this show.
I love it.
Right. And actually, Trump was literally a performer in the WWE.
Yeah.
I don't know if people know. Look it up on YouTube. You'll see. It'll change your perception of Donald Trump. I'll tell you that.
Oh, man.
All right. Let's see. There's this question. I don't know anything about that. I don't know who Stephen Miller is. I don't know what he was talking to President Trump about. 9-0 Supreme Court. I don't really pay attention to these internal political matters of the U.S. Is like we keep saying, it is all theater. And let's just take the WWE. It would be like the WWE, World's Wrestling and Entertainment. Is that what it stands for? I don't know. WWE is a real company. It's an entertainment company. It's a corporation. They make money. They have board meetings, they have a strategy, they have financial documents, but it would be like you want to know the health of this real world's company by watching a WWE match on TV. And you're like watching the wrestlers in the ring and they're fighting with each other. And even Ed McMahon, I think he's the owner of WWE in real life. He also is a performer and he comes in, and it would be like trying to watch that theater to try to figure out how the WWE is doing as a real company. It doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of time. You will never figure anything out because it's all theater. It's make-believe. Mm-hmm. A lot of what happens in U.S. politics is just complete make-believe. You look at the WWE has financial documents and board meetings and things like that you could look at to ascertain the health of the company. The U.S. government has policy papers. Just read the policy papers and you will know absolutely everything that is going on years in advance. I don't have psychic powers. There was a question. I didn't put it up on the screen because it was asking like, Brian, how does it feel to always be right about everything? But the thing is, I'm just reading the policy papers. I don't have some special power. I'm not exceptionally intelligent. I just know to look at the policy papers and just repeat it over and over and over again. And eventually it's going to happen because that is the blue. An empire is a huge thing. If building just one house on a little piece of land requires blueprints, then building an empire requires tremendous amounts of blueprints. And that's what the policy papers are. If you're not reading them, you have no idea what's going on. You're watching WWE matches and listening to stage performances to try to figure out how the company is actually doing in real life. It's impossible. It's impossible. Let's see. But maybe there's more to that question because I don't actually know what they're talking about. Let's see. What are the chances Trump or Israel nukes Yemen in an act of desperation? Yemen is embarrassing them, so they might feel tempted. But the problem is, what are you going to nuke in Yemen? What are you going to nuke? Because the problem is Ansar Allah is dispersed across the entire country. This is how they've managed to get by so long. And so effectively, they're a dispersed organization. So what do you nuke? Do you nuke a civilian center or destroy them economically? I don't know. I would say there's a better chance that the U.S. or Israel will nuke Iran and nuke sites regarding their ballistic missiles or their nuclear capabilities, or even maybe civilian centers to try to destroy their economy. Yemen's economy has already been completely destroyed. Rasheed, you have any insight on that question? Or
the nuking part, I don't know, due to the fact that if the U.S. or Israel nukes Iran or nukes Yemen, we have to think about the after effects of it. This just is not to nuke that country because you have a blowback of nuclear material. And with the winds heading eastward, then this could be considered a nuclear strike on China or a nuclear strike on Russia because of the after effect of that. So if they're planning on doing it, they have to do it with mini nukes or what they call strategic suitcase nukes or something like that, because if they use anything bigger and the blowback is the contamination level reaches China, North Korea, or Russia, they can take that as a direct nuclear strike on them and then respond. So when we're looking at that, we have to bear in mind that as a consideration, and maybe that is what's holding some of that back. But also, I remember reading a paper out of Pakistan, and this was bagged by some of the former intelligence generals, head of the intelligence service, and they said that if Israel were to use a nuke on Iran or nation that's close to Pakistan, Pakistan would be forced to retaliate with a nuclear strike against Israel. So that may be something. You know, we know that Pakistan is compromised, but at the same time, you can only ignore the will of the people for so long before they force your hand at it. And so these are risks that I wouldn't say that the empire wouldn't take, but I'm saying that they may be a last option for them to nuke Iran. Because remember, Iran could constitute a nuclear weapon within weeks if they so chose to. So and Iran would not allow that to just go, you nuke us and we're just going to make a nuclear bomb and not use it back on you. So and think about Iran is like, when you look at Iran, it's like the size of, a little bit bigger than the size of Alaska, I believe it is. And Alaska is like two and a half sizes Texas. So a nuke would affect them, but a couple of nukes on Israel would pretty much end Israel forever.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't. There's so many. Basically, what you're saying, Rasheed, is there's a huge number of negative consequences for using nuclear weapons, which is why people are just using them left and right. They have them, but they don't use them. They're supposed to be the ultimate deterrent. You wouldn't use it just because you're getting frustrated with Yemen, because I mean, the U.S. was frustrated with Vietnam, Afghanistan, all of these other countries, and they never knew. They thought about doing it, but they never actually did it. So I don't see them nuking Yemen. I don't think if they're going to use their nuclear weapons, they're going to use them for something very specific in the hopes that it delivers a knockout blow. They're not just going to do it just to do it, because there's just so many negative consequences for doing so. The problem is, because the U.S. controls Israel, everyone thinks it's the other way around. If Israel were to use a nuclear weapon, all of these people who hate Israel so much and think Israel's the center of some dark global empire, you will be giving the U.S. a pass when it was the U.S. who used Israel to carry out a nuclear strike. It itself wanted to, but knew it couldn't get away with, and then had their Israeli proxies do it for them. So just always keep that in mind. We didn't really talk about Taiwan. I don't think we talked much about Taiwan. Taiwan is a Chinese island province, but it has been politically captured by the United States. Even has U.S. troops semi-secretly stationed there, because we know about it, so it's totally secret. Do you think the U.S. would intervene directly with it? I don't think they would, because the U.S. I don't think could win a war directly with China right off China's shores. I think they would use Taiwan in the exact same way they've used Ukraine, which is to create a pretext for the U.S. to force Europe and everyone, all of its other proxies, to completely cut off China, and also enact a global maritime blockade on China. They've even talked about doing it to Russia because of Ukraine. I think that was a test run and testing the waters, no pun intended, for a maritime blockade of China. All the U.S. needs to do is trigger one of these conflicts. Doesn't need to win any of these conflicts, just needs to create it, so they can then justify a global maritime blockade of Chinese shipping. The U.S. is already complaining about Chinese shipbuilding being way bigger than the U.S. I mean, the U.S. has almost a non-existent shipbuilding capability, and they're going to start putting fees on Chinese-built ships coming into American ports, basically prohibiting them from coming into American ports. So they are already putting all of the pieces in place for a maritime blockade of China. They just need an excuse. So what excuse are they going to use? Taiwan, Philippines. That's all. That's the only two I could really think of off the top of my head. That's what I think the real goal would be. Here's a question. Brian, can you make a video about your income since your videos aren't monetized, and at the same time you are upload videos? So at the end of literally every video that I have ever made, at the end of every single video, I tell people I do not monetize my YouTube channel. So if you want to support my work, please go to Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon, and you can support my work. You could give me a one-time donation. Some people give me donations month to month. Or if you have no money at all to spare, just share my work with others. Get the information out there. That's first and foremost most important to me. I'm at the receiving end of American empire, and I don't want my home burned down. I have a family. I would like to see my kids grow up in a normal world. So that's my first payoff. If I can convince people to speak up and oppose and stop all of these wars the U.S. wants to destroy the planet. But yes, of course, I ask people for donations, and my audience is very generous, and they have enabled me to do this full time. I'm very grateful. And Rasheed, I know you do something very similar. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the video description of this video, you will see all of the information, all the places you can find and follow both my work and Rasheed's, and also ways you can help support our work. I don't want to monetize my YouTube videos. I don't want anything to do with YouTube as a US-based company. And I also don't want people to think that I'm saying things just to get views, just so I can make extra money, because that's what a lot of people will think. Well, if I didn't monetize it, then there's no reason for me to get more views from my videos. The people who are going to support my work are going to support it through Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon either way. So I hope that clears that up. People say, well, you don't monetize your YouTube channel. There's no possible other way I could be making money. I must, and some people have said I must be getting my money from China or Russia. I mean, I write for a journal in Moscow, and I occasionally write articles for other publications, and I get compensated for it. But I only do that if they don't tell me what to write and they don't heavily edit edit at all. Like New Eastern Outlook, I've written for them for years. They never so much as they don't even edit it when I spell words wrong. They just, whatever I send them, they publish it. And that's great. That's like, what else could you ask for? And you get compensated for it. All writers on earth throughout the history of writing get compensated for the writing, or else how are they going to feed themselves? So I hope that clears things up. Right, like Rasheed, you have Patreon and
Yes.
Buy Me a Coffee, or okay.
Yes.
And I will put that in the video description below afterwards. Let's see. And Rasheed, if there's only 5 more, but if at any point you want to leave during the questions and answers, you're more than free to do so. What's up with the pivot by Japan and to China and Russia? Is Japan and South Korea going to ditch US and jump to the BRICS club? Okay. This is important for people to understand. Put yourself back in pre-2014 US-European relations. Europe was talking about ditching the US, working with Russia, working with China. Germany was building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. There was a Belt and Road Initiative push into Europe. China was actually running freight from not just China, but Southeast Asia all the way to Europe and back again. And so there was this huge explosion in cooperation between Europe, Russia, China. And then the US destroyed it all, because the US, there were business interests in Europe that were benefiting from that cooperation. But ultimately, the EU is a bureaucratic layer, like a fire blanket that they just threw over all of Europe to smother sovereignty and independent foreign policy, economic policy, and just suffocated all of that cooperation, cut everything off, literally blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, and cut them off from Russia and China. So Japan, South Korea, ultimately, they are still politically captured by the US. Special interests in Japan and South Korea benefit from doing business with China, obviously. And there are no alternatives the US can offer them to change that. But because they politically capture the government, ultimately, the US still gets the final say. So they might be saying things like this, but don't bet too much on it, because at the end of the day, the US still gets a veto. Until that changes, until the US no longer has that political control over Japan and South Korea, then this will always be a problem. And so it's counterintuitive, but yes, the US will force these countries to completely work against their best interests. Case in point, an extreme case in point, Ukraine, and also the Philippines, which we talked about today. Rasheed, you have any thoughts on that you want to add?
I believe when the war takes place in Asia, and the United States is weakened by it, because the United States is not going to allow China this peaceful rise. It just is not going to happen. All of the policy papers, all of the moves that we see now taking place, from the United States trying to take the Panama Canal, to trying to take Greenland, to trying to set up more bases and partner with India in the Indian Ocean, and then all around the Persian Gulf and in the South China Sea. America is not going to go quietly into the night and allow China to rise peacefully. And this will cause a war. And I believe what is going to happen is that America will become weakened, because she's going to have to fight Iran first. And Iran is going to give it just as good as she takes it, and that'll weaken America. And when she goes to fight China, I believe that she'll be in such a weakened state that her lackeys, like Japan and South Korea, will then take it upon themselves to, to either break the chains that they're now under, or at least strain those chains, because people have to understand that the Japanese people haven't forgotten that America dropped 2 nuclear bombs on them. That is not forgotten. I mean, even though they haven't made much fuss about it in international press, they do it when it comes around. These people have not forgotten that. What did America say? Never forget 9/11. Never forget this. These other nations haven't forgotten what has been done to them either. They're just not in a position to yell at the top of their lungs and let everybody know, hey, we were wrong by this nation, because they are still subjected to that nation. But once the chains are broken by this war in Asia, I believe you'll see more Asian nations speaking more freely, and more of them siding with Asia for Asia and trade in Asia. And I think America sees that. I think she sees the writing on the wall, and that's why she's willing to play ping pong with Taiwan and with the Philippines, and sacrifice these nations to try to keep her hegemony and to prevent this from happening.
Yes, and I know a lot of Japanese people who are not okay with being U.S. puppets, and they're not okay with the U.S. military. This was part of my wake up. I was in the U.S. Marine Corps. I asked to go to Japan. I wanted to go overseas, which just that alone, you're like, why does the U.S. have military bases overseas? But, again, I was young and dumb, and I didn't know any better. I went over to Japan, and I saw with my own eyes, and I saw how great these people were. And I saw what the U.S. military was doing, despite claiming they're allies and we're there to protect them. But we were preying on them. We were dominating them. We were treating them horrible. And we went out of our way to do horrible things to them, to show them, who is the boss. And that didn't sit well for me. That's not what I signed up for, even as blind and as young and dumb as I was. And talking to the Japanese people, seeing how angry and upset some of them were. I mean, some of them are brainwashed, some of them are not. And it really was key to me waking up. That's how it all started. And so I'm sure there's people in South Korea who don't want the U.S. military there. There are protests in both countries all the time against U.S. military presence there. There's also a huge push by the U.S. and their puppet regimes in both of these countries to try to brainwash people and smooth it over and normalize it. But as you say, Rasheed, the U.S. dropped not 1, but 2 atomic bombs on Japan. They wiped out 2 cities. So how could anyone forget that? No matter how hard you try to reframe history. I think we answered this question. Will empire choose to destroy an earth it can't rule? I think so, yes. I mean, that's basically what they're doing. They can't have these countries, so they destroy them. They couldn't have Syria, so they destroyed it. They couldn't have Libya, they destroyed it. These countries are still destroyed to this day. They couldn't control what was going on in Iraq, so they invaded, occupied, and destroyed it. It's still a wreck even to this day. And that is the threat the U.S. hangs over the head of everyone else. This is why China doesn't want to go to war with the U.S. Russia doesn't want to go to direct war with the U.S. because they know what will happen. Look what's happening in Ukraine right now. For China regarding Taiwan, that is part of China. They don't want to turn Taiwan into another Ukraine if they can help it. If they have to suffer indignation and humiliation by the U.S. in the short term to ensure a peaceful transition in Taiwan from the politically captured client regime to reunification, full reunification, then they will. And that's what makes China different than the United States. Everyone always says China is just going to be like the US, but even worse. They've already demonstrated this the first country in human history to become a global power without firing a single shot. This has all happened during this 21st century. China in the 21st century has not fired a single shot at anyone else ever in any conflict. People will say, well, there was this time in the 70s. That was last century. I'm talking about this century. The rise of China started, I would say, like around the early 2000s. This really started to gain momentum. And then it really began rising up and taking its place as a superpower. It did that without firing a single shot. And you could argue that its incursion into Vietnam, which was a U.S. proxy war, and everything was screwed up in the region, that was an anomaly, because other than that, what else has China done? What other conflict had they participated in? So no, China's not going to be like the U.S. They've already demonstrated that they are not like the United States. Let's see what else.
And once more with that, Brian, to show that China is not going to be like the United States is look at what they did in a short period of time. They moved 850 million people from poverty to the middle class. That is to move all of Europe and the population of the United States from being poor to middle class. That's unheard of.
And the Belt and Road Initiative is all about building infrastructure to raise up other countries. So they're not coming in like the IMF and just preying on them with finance. They're actually building physical infrastructure they will own. Of course, they're like, oh, it's debt. They're going to pay it back. Of course, you build something, you have to pay for it, right? And yes, there will be debt, but you have a physical asset that is actually benefiting your whole country, your population, your economy. In the long run, it makes sense. This is how China itself lifted all of those people out of poverty. And now they're doing this with the rest of the world. So they're leveling the playing field with their partners, which is something the US and Europe never did. They did the exact opposite. They always maintained domination over all of the other countries they interacted with on purpose. They denied them technology. They did not transfer technology willingly to these countries. This is why they're so upset with China. And they're saying, you stole our IP, you took all of our ideas. You know, they were building all of your stuff, and now they're building their own stuff, and they're doing it better than you ever did, and better and in greater quantities, quality, everything. And now you're upset because this is the horse getting out of the barn. These are people that were supposed to forever be subordinated to the collective West, and now they're on their way to surpassing the collective West. That's their worst nightmare. You know, a supremacist's worst nightmare is the people they think they're superior to demonstrating otherwise. How about this one? Please, your comments on under the radar deals with Brits to undercut Trump on mineral deal as per Alex Craner. Well, I don't know what Alex Craner has said about the mineral deal. The mineral deal is nuts. People who are talking about Trump and this mineral deal with Ukraine, like in any other way, then this is completely insane. The U.S. just overthrew the elected government of Ukraine, put a client regime in place, reorganized the military and intelligence agencies, turned it into a weapon, and then used it against Russia, provoked an unprecedented war in Europe this 21st century. Thousands and thousands of people are dying. The whole country, Ukraine, is being destroyed. Its economy, its infrastructure being absolutely devastated. Millions leaving the country, people dying in the country. And then Trump comes along, he says, you guys have to agree to whatever we tell you to do. And in exchange, you have to give us all your... So what they did was they went to someone else's house, burned it to the ground. And then there's like putting a gun to the owner's head and saying, let's go through and see if anything survived. And if it survived, put it in this bag for me. That is the mineral deal. It's insane. You're adding robbery on top of arson of an entire nation. And people are talking about the Trump mineral deal like it's any other way than that. I mean, they've lost touch with reality. So like undercutting Trump on a mineral deal, the mineral deal is insane. But no, I don't think the Brits are undercutting the U.S. on anything. Does anyone remember the British Minister of Defense, or whatever they're called in the UK, literally came to the table and to Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, and he's like, yes, in February 12th, you told us to do A, B, and C with our military and our funding and our supporting Ukraine. And not only are we going to do it, but we're going to do even more than you told us to do. So, I mean, come on. The Europe has been politically captured by the U.S. to the point where even big corporations in Europe that are not part of the Wall Street, Washington blob are being told to be quiet and subordinate themselves to that blob. And so no, there's no undercutting going on. As Rasheed said, this is the theater. This is all theater. It's a head fake. It's meant to make some kind of excuse why Trump's peace deal isn't working, other than the real reason it's not working, because there was no real peace deal to begin with. There was no intention for peace. This is a freeze deal, not a peace deal. I hope that catches on. Freeze deal instead of peace deal. You guys can all use that one. Let's see. Could you address the recent news from Russia? Okay, so yes, we did this already earlier. No, I constantly said that I didn't see any evidence of this. Russia is now claiming that this was happening, but Ukraine failed to provide any actual compelling evidence that this was happening. So it kind of makes you wonder. There's a lot of questions raised by this. What role were they actually playing? I think we'll have to wait in the days and weeks, maybe even months or longer to come, what role North Korean troops actually played. And maybe they weren't right up on the front line or whatever, and that's why Ukraine didn't have more evidence of them being involved, or maybe it was something else. I don't know. But if we did talk about that, I guess we're talking about it a little bit more now. Okay, one more question. By employing a turbocharged Belt and Road Initiative win-win cooperative development strategy, why doesn't China turn Iran into an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East? Well, I mean, Iran has a lot of, people don't understand, Iran has a lot of problems. They've been targeted by the U.S. for decades. They've been undermined for decades by the U.S. There are militant groups inside Iran killing police and military all the time. There's terrorist groups operating along the edges of Iranian territory. There are militants in Baluchistan, Pakistan, that the U.S. backs to kill people on both sides of the border, including targeting the Belt and Road Initiative in Pakistan that goes through Baluchistan. They have political subversion, economic sanctions. And so for China to come in and do anything, you need stability. And the U.S. is denying Iran stability. So this is how the U.S. has been able to keep this so precarious. Just like we always say, they don't have a plan to actually build something different. Their plan is to just destroy everything, keep everybody off balance, to keep constant chaos. They can't compete with China and Russia and Iran and multipolarism. They can't. It's impossible. It will never happen. But what they can do is prevent multipolarism from succeeding by constantly hitting it in the kneecap and trying to keep it on the ground, kick it while it's down on the ground, keep it from getting back up. So this is why China couldn't do that. If they could, maybe they would. Maybe they would try to do that. Rasheed, look at what has happened with North Korea. They were able to, and they did. So now North Korea is more or less unassailable, not nearly a precarious position as Iran is. Rasheed, anything you want to say about this or anything else, since that is the last question we are going to go over in this episode?
Something about the minerals rights and how the U.S. continues to talk about repayment of investments in Ukraine. And I would liken that to this. A person breaks into the house, drops their wallet because the robbery goes wrong, and they leave the house and they come back and say, hey, you owe me my wallet and my money that I dropped when I was robbing your house. The insanity of that would make people pause. But when we put it on America, we just We overlook it and we keep stepping with it, even though it is absolutely insane. America started the war. America overthrew the government. America funded it. America trained. America supplied the weapons, and it's still doing that right now. So this was not on Ukraine per se. This was an investment of empire. And so they didn't get a return in their investment. And now they want to strong arm the victim, because Ukraine is also a victim of American hubris and American intransigence. They want to strong arm Ukraine and Russia. They want to make Russia capitulate. Even though Russia is winning, they want them to capitulate as if they're losing. And they want Ukraine to just give away everything, even though it was the United States that overthrew the government. It was the United States that embedded its military in all of these places and funded this so-called escapade or war against Russia. And now they're crying that they did not yield a productive crop. And so they want to burn down the entire cornfield. It's absolutely insane, man.
Yes. Or, since we're doing analogies, it's like if you broke into somebody's house, pushed their car out of the garage, burned the car to the ground for some reason, I don't know why, and then you set up like a meth lab in the garage, and then the meth lab went up and you lost like $1 million you invested, and you had like all the drugs you were going to sell, and then you tell the owner, you have to pay me back. This all went wrong and you have to pay me back. Because that's what the US did. They went into Ukraine to fight a war against Russia. They didn't come in to help Ukraine. Ukraine was fine doing business with Russia and Europe before 2014. There were no problems at all. So the US invited themselves and forced their way in, actually, violently. And they fought this war through Ukraine against Russia, destroyed everything. And now Trump is saying, you guys have to pay it back. But it's very good at pandering to the MAGA crowd. And you see, just like we said, brain colonization isn't just for people outside the West. People in the West, they are brainwashed also. And you see people, just because they support Trump, they support the mineral deal. Oh, get our money back from that evil Biden war that Trump always brags about, selling weapons or sending weapons to Ukraine even before it all started. Let's forget that part and let's just blame it all on Biden and then say we need to rob Ukraine to get our money back from this war we actually started. It just goes to show you how disconnected absolutely everyone involved is. Not in Washington, because I think it is a game. I think they really think it's funny that they could get Americans to agree to this and to support this. But for Americans themselves to not be able to see through this and understand what it is that they're supporting, it just goes to show you how hopeless the whole Western system is. And again, with democracy, I don't think the average individual anywhere, I'm not picking on just Westerners, I don't think anyone anywhere on average has the ability to vote for like national leaders are in charge of everything. They have to look at economics, military matters, diplomacy. You're talking about infrastructure, building infrastructure, maintaining infrastructure, all of these things that need to be done. What does the average person know about any of this? It would be like having everyone come together. There's a nuclear power plant in the neighborhood, and getting everybody together and saying, hey, let's vote on some safety procedures at the nuclear power plant. What do we know about nuclear power plants? How are we qualified to vote on any of this? We're not. So just let experts do that, which is why the system in China is so brilliant. To have elections locally, you can understand local issues, and you could in an informed manner vote for local representatives. Those representatives who are running things locally vote for the next level above them. That level votes for the next level above them. So we're talking about people who are involved in the system, running the system, hopefully efficiently, effectively. They are capable of understanding, grasping, wrapping their mind around the next level above them. They can pick all the way up to president. President of China is picked by a group of people who have worked their way up through the system and who have been selected all the way up through the system. And so that makes much more sense. We all want to believe that we have ultimate, infinite agency and ability to make informed decisions, but we don't. I mean, maybe you and I, Rasheed, we spend all day doing this, And so maybe we understand it, and maybe we think, well, everybody can say, what's the big deal? Like, I remember what it was like before I did this full time, and how, like, you're working 12 hours a day or longer. At the end of the day, you're not watching news. If you are, you turn the news on for 5 minutes and you're passed out on the sofa. That's what's happening. And so I'm not saying that people are dumb or ignorant or incapable. I'm just saying, because of the reality that we live in modern society, we don't have the ability to do that. So why are we being allowed to do it? And the system in the West is really a system of control when you think about it. We could vote for anyone we want in the US or in Europe. Doesn't matter, because whoever we vote for, they're just going to do whatever special interests tell them to do. And you'll have Biden do his song and dance and Trump doing his song and dance, and they'll appear superficially to be opposed. But once they get into office and the policy starts flowing, it is continuity of agenda. So that's, I just think that's important for people to understand about elections, Western democracy. I mean, it's something that's also something I like to rant about, even if it's not brought up. Rasheed, you have any closing thoughts? We're almost exactly at 2 hours.
Yeah. One thing, Natalie D, you said Rasheed is wrong about Ukraine being a victim. I think you misunderstood. I'm saying a victim of empire. We understand that the Nazis are in control. I'm not saying that they are innocent in this. I'm saying that they are a victim of empire. They fell for the overthrow. They fell for the propaganda. That's what I was getting at, Natalie. So hopefully that clears that up.
Yeah, and ordinary Ukrainians are obviously victims, and it's hard to feel sorry for. I'm like, you're a Nazi in the year 2025 and you still don't get it. It's very hard to feel sorry for you. But again, there's this propaganda, political capture, political control, and I feel bad. I feel bad for Ukraine. The government, the client regime that's installed into power. I don't feel sorry for them. But the rest of Ukraine, I do feel sorry for. And if you know a lot of Russians who are involved in this conflict or are in the government, there's no real deep animosity towards Ukrainians, because essentially it's just an extension of Russia. Ukrainians like to pretend that, we speak Ukrainian. It's totally different than Russian. Like, I know like 5 or 6 words in Russian, and they're the exact same in Ukraine. And if you read Cyrillic, you could read all the signs in Ukraine. So it's like, come on. It's like they're doing this in Taiwan also, where they're like, we're not Chinese. We just speak Mandarin, and we're obviously Chinese. But again, this is imposed on them by the U.S. It's not something that they would ever be doing on their own. This makes no sense. It doesn't follow to their best interests. So yes, sometimes people mistaken things that I say about Israel when I say they think I'm defending Israel. I'm not defending Israel. The government, the military are absolutely horrible. They're as bad as the Nazis in Ukraine. They are proxies of the U.S. They do whatever the U.S. Tells them to do, and it's horrible things on purpose to provoke and anger people, to get emotions to override their reason. But ultimately, this is you want to get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is Wall Street. Okay, so we can fight all day against the Ukrainians and the Israelis, but if we don't understand there's someone behind that needs to be dealt with, that's all you're pulling weeds that are just going to keep popping up. You got to get to the root of the problem. All right. I want to thank you, Rasheed, for joining me. It's so much easier to do this with a co-host or some guests. And I'm sure the comment section will agree. You do excellent commentary, have a lot of great insight. I know I always learn something when you come on. I want to thank everyone who tuned in live, and also people who are tuning in afterwards. Please check the video description below. After we're done, I'm going to put Rasheed's all his information in there. Angelo's information is in there, but he is the usual co-host. He is taking a break for a while. Like I said, this is exhausting.
Yes,
you need a break every once in a while. So hopefully he'll be back soon. And until then, bye for now.